called The War of Arthur. When Arthur calls and asks me to fly across the country to see him, I go. I would be the last one to see Arthur. I felt awkward but happy to be an imposter in a hotel suite for 3 days in Virginia. Our war story would not be our grandparents or great-grandparents, where they left old love letters and 60-year reunions. We left technological footprints, biological, and in the form of kindergartners not landing in the same beds every other weekend, and the fear that when airplanes flew too low, the world would come to an end again, and again, and again. I don't know if it is better to be the other woman. Sunday evenings are the worst because the other woman does laundry. The other woman lets the hair on her legs grow for the evening to give a closer shave for the next time he calls, and she waits to be ripe again. The other woman is the faith that gets twisted along the way. I didn't think 3 days in Virginia would turn out how they did. Virginia was the land where a country attacked and destroyed itself through the few years of the rebellious Confederacy and the Northern Union. We went on a small tour of downtown Richmond on a Sunday afternoon. There was only one museum that was open, and the lonely volunteer was too eager to offer free maps and directions to other tourist sites and monuments and battlefields. In one afternoon, we were told that we would see all of the important places where the Confederacy shined. The volunteer held on to the word shine for longer than what she should have while circling and underlining streets and blocks and places to park. The volunteer handed the map to Arthur, and when he was finished, he took it and smiled and understood and was able to understand the landscape without having to study it too long. When Arthur talked, it was quiet. It was monotone. For months, we shared manic phone calls in the middle of the night, zigzagging from the East Coast to the West. We shared our desires, fears, temptations, and lies, and we whispered them all into the receiver. The purging gradually growing worse, and its truth and feeling better to be let out. Arthur was married, but said he didn't feel married anymore since his wife had cheated on him. They had a 3-year-old daughter. He didn't want to go through a divorce because it would look bad on paper, and that was that. I was afraid to go down on a man. I didn't like screwing with the lights on, and I always thought my breath smelled like garlic, and I hated paper clips, and that was that. Arthur is going to war soon. I ask if he is ready, and he laughs at me. We watch a movie on the hotel television, and I ask if he is all right after images of the Civil War battlefields hang on the screen for too long. He laughs at me. I look at his dog tags that he leaves on the desk while he takes a shower. I run my fingers over the pressed letters. I read that his religion is non-denomination. I see a series of numbers and reach for the pen and notepad that are near me so I can write them down and remember the sequence. Then I decide that this is his wife's job. I put my hands in my lap and look at the dog tags and wonder what they will look like with blood on them. Fresh red blood, and then dried brown blood. I wondered if dog tags are washed off before they are returned to a family. Arthur leaves his dog tags off when he goes inside of me. He laughs afterwards, but not at me or anything in particular. I am the other woman. In Latin, the name Arthur is pronounced Arcturus. Some think it means a brightness and a position in the sky that led people to regard it as the guardian of the bear and the leader of the other stars in Boötes. Boötes is one of the largest constellations in the northern sky, and it is said that Boötes represented Echirus. Echirus, an Athenian, was said to be taught how to make wine by Dionysus, and when Echirus gave some peasants a sample of the wine he made, the offer backfired. As they drank the wine, the peasants became drunk and convinced that they had been poisoned, and they ended up killing him. When Arthur would sleep, he would roll to his right side and hug the edge of the bed. He did not snore, and he did not sigh or breathe heavily. He didn't move. As soon as his head hit the pillow and the lights went out, he fell into a deep sleep. Even when I wrapped my arm around him, he wouldn't move into the crutch of my hips to get closer, nor did he push away. In the morning, he'd wake up in the same position he fell asleep in, as if no time had passed at all. At dinner, Arthur puts his fork and knife down while chewing with his lips shut. He puts both of his hands in his lap under the table, his arms flexing a little each time he wrings one hand over the other. I look at the bloody mess on his plate, and he keeps chewing and looking down. I look at the bourbon I should finish. He keeps chewing, and I look at the half-eaten steak bleeding out onto the plate, pink and fleshy, and my chopped salad, all on white linens. Arthur shifts in the booth, and I keep looking at the watered-down bourbon and feel his hand on my thigh. I'm eating with a dead man. Arthur keeps chewing for a little bit, and I stare out from the mahogany booth we're sitting in. I stare at the empty bar across from us, occupied by a young man twisting a white towel in and out of glasses, glaring out the window, never breaking from his set rhythm. In college, I remember a Spanish lecture where the professor showed the class an episode of The Twilight Zone in an attempt to explain how a particular tense, the preterite, combined the perfective aspect of an event viewed as a single whole. She made it clear that this shouldn't be confused with the similarly named perfect with the past tense, and that it may also be referred to as the perfect past. This is when she smiled at no one in particular in the lecture hall and quietly, slowly said to herself, "In grammars of particular languages, the preterite is sometimes called the past historic, the perfect past." And she paused and said again to herself, "The perfect past." I love the concept of the perfective past and the past historic. It went against the simple past and present, plain and simple, that worked in my native English language and in my native storage of memory. So the professor showed the episode of The Twilight Zone titled The After Hours, written by Rod Sterling. I think the professor showed us this episode to demonstrate the disconnect between what we think is the past and what actually is the past. But it's what the actual episode was about that always stayed with me. It focused on a woman shopping for a present in a department store for her mother's birthday. Towards the end of the episode, you learned that the woman shopping is actually a mannequin from the store and had been taking turns with the other store mannequins on a monthly rotation to go out into the real world. The mannequins were able to live a normal life and go where they wanted to go before returning to the department store to be placed back on display. The mannequin's name was Marcia White. Let's pretend, I say. The hotel room is dark and Arthur is lying on his side with his back to me. We have just fucked. I stare at his back and listen to the air conditioner kick on and off in 5-minute intervals. Let's pretend, I say, that this hotel room is the master bedroom in a 2-story house and the elevator dings outside our door really belong to a grandfather clock downstairs. Let's pretend, I say, that there isn't a little refrigerator in the corner of the room that hums all night long, or that there isn't a printed escape route behind plexiglass bolted to the door in case there is an emergency. Let's pretend that you are drifting in and out of sleep, and I'm going over what needs to be done for the next day, including a trip to the hardware store, a soccer game for an older son, and a ballet class for a younger daughter, and dinner for the neighbors. Let's pretend, I say, that you sigh heavily when I rattle off this list. But you sigh heavily because it makes you proud that you provide for this list to exist, and I take a deep breath in and then let it out, exasperated that I somehow, once again, skillfully put a plan in order for the next day. Let's pretend, I say, that I will remember that there's a freckle on your right shoulder, and that I always think is a sore that you keep digging at, and that I will always remember what you smell like, and how quietly you sleep. Let's pretend, I say, waiting for you to play along. Let's pretend, I say, that Arthur doesn't hear me. I am like Marcia White. My job for 3 days, I wrote a song alongside Arthur in his car, was to gather the correct amount of change for the toll booths we passed on the Virginian highways. The console space in front of the gear shift was open and housed with a mix of gum wrappers, a few lighters, and a pack of cigarettes, and enough quarters and dimes that the pennies and nickels had eventually been forced to the bottom of the tray. But by the 3rd day of gathering change for the toll, we had gone through the quarters and dimes, so I moved the lighters and dug around with my forefinger through the nickels and pennies. I swept the gum wrappers out and onto the floorboard during my search. I had to shove the pack of cigarettes to the side, and then I saw it. This was the new American marriage. I stared at the ring and wanted it to be a washer or a screw or a bolt or something mechanical that held the card or something massive beyond my technical knowledge together. There it was, mixed in with pennies and more gum wrappers that I hadn't swept away yet, his wedding ring. I wanted the brakes to go out on the truck. I wanted to be thrown through the windshield. I felt a weight detonate in my chest and in my stomach. I felt my fingers go numb and my teeth felt like they were coming loose all at once. If I could tell Arthur anything now, I would tell him to take the wedding ring out from under the pack of cigarettes and either put it back on or throw it out the window. Something wakes me up in the middle of the night and I look at the digital clock on the nightstand. It reads midnight, 1200 or 2400, I mixed the two up. I still struggled with military time. This was the only time Arthur used. I kept a notepad by the phone so I could translate military time to standard East Coast time or West Coast time, so I would know when to call and when I would hear from him next. Arthur is asleep and I didn't close the drapes of the hotel window before we fell asleep. The light from the alley makes the room look blue, and once my eyes adjust, everything comes out of the shadows, and it is bright as ever. The headstones gnaw through the meat of the earth. I see rows and rows and rows of headstones, bright white, a mouth wide open, screaming towards God. I tell Arthur to look over as we drive by the National Cemetery. We pass it for 2 blocks, and the windows are down in the car, and the wind is whipping through, blowing my hair in my face. The grass is a green carpet on top of the subtle waves of the mounds that jut up and down every few hundred feet. By the time Arthur looks over, we've passed the gate opening, and a stone wall blocks the cemetery from view. I want him to be unnerved by this. I want him to see the death in the masses. I want him to slow down and let go of the gear shift and rest his hand on my thigh. I want him to disappear like he already has. In my dream, I'm walking on a sidewalk and I come upon a dead dog in front of me. I don't want to step on it. I stop and look down, and I don't want to step on it. I think about how many dead dogs Arthur will see. I wonder if he'll kick them with the toe of his boot while he marches, waiting to be blown up. I don't see the dog's rib cage move. It doesn't go up and down, in and out like an accordion. I wonder if this is what young mothers do in the middle of the night when they hug the doorway of their baby's room as they stare through the dark into the crib, watching the rib cage move up and down. Arthur will see dead babies. He has told me this. He has told me that they have prepared him for this. They have told him that the babies over there are brown and don't matter. Arthur seems satisfied with this. In my dream, I poke the dead dog with the back of the heel I'm wearing. Arthur will see a lot of dead dogs. I hate the dates printed on plastic milk jugs. They mock you every time you open the refrigerator, reminding you how time is passing, going away, ticking like a horrible calendar that is required to live. I open my refrigerator at least 7 or 8 times a day, and each time I see the date. I try turning the gallon of milk around so I wouldn't see the date, but then the handle is on the wrong side for me to grab. I have a rhythm. I don't like the rhythm to be disrupted. I also thought I would try to trick myself in a different way. When I went to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk, I would grab one from the very back of the shelf. The fresher gallons are in the back in order to have a longer shelf life. By me grabbing a gallon from the back, this would help my anxiety when I saw the date on the jug in my refrigerator. I'd have a few extra days. I'd have a little extra time. This week, the gallon of milk will expire on August 15th. On August 10th, I opened the refrigerator only 2 times due to having just tea and toast for breakfast and skipping lunch and walking out on a half-eaten meal for dinner at the corner Chinese restaurant. On August 11th, I opened the refrigerator door 3 times in the morning just to look at the date on the plastic jug. We're in the double digits now, I think to myself. It's coming, I say to myself. On August 12th, I cry a lot. I wander around the house and I don't eat or drink. I don't open the refrigerator at all. On August 13th, I open the refrigerator door and reach for the gallon of milk. I wrap my right hand around the handle and grip it, rub my thumb on the cap and look at August 15th. I pick up my suit from the cleaners. August 14th comes and goes, and so does August 15th, and on August 16th I open the refrigerator door and reach for the gallon of milk and throw it out, placing a new gallon with a new date in its place. Arthur's funeral has passed, and now the dates on the plastic gallon jugs of milk would remind me of how each week passes, taking me farther and farther away from them. I have a white towel wrapped around me with a knot tucked under my armpit. My legs are red from standing in the shower for too long. I walk from one end of the room to the other. The drapes are pulled to one side of the hotel suite window. It is night, and the room is warm and has an orange glow to it. I lean against the windowsill, illuminated. I look out the building and can see the ladders I look out across the alley at the building across from us and at the ladders of windows across. How I pictured that. Yeah. There is a window with the drapes pulled back with a woman standing, leaning against the sill just as I am. She is illuminated too. She has a towel wrapped around her body and a towel around her head. She sees me. The air conditioner kicks on in the room and the smell of coolant fills the room way too much. From what I can tell, she is alone in her room just like I am. She raises her right arm and without breaking her stare, unwraps the towel from her head. The towel falls to her shoulders, a twisted knot, while a pile of full blonde hair follows. I do the same thing and pull the towel off of my head and let it fall to my shoulders. My tangled wet hair stays in a clump on the top of my head. My right arm reaches for the knot under my armpit, and I undo the towel around my body and let it drop to the ground. The woman in the window across the alley watches and does the same thing. Her chest moves up and down. Her collarbone juts out a little more on the right side than the left. Her arms hang and she looks down. My arms hang too, but I keep looking at her, not breaking my stare. We're both naked, illuminated in hotel windows, waiting for our lovers to come back. I stand in line with Arthur at the bank. He says he needs to get money out this way, cash, so his wife can't tell. Behind us in line there is a baby crying. Its mother isn't paying attention and the baby keeps crying, strapped into the stroller. Arthur finishes with the teller. He starts to back away and reaches for my hand while he pushes away from the counter. I reach my hand to meet his and am met with him shoving a handful of $20 bills in it. We are making our way out of the bank while this happens, and the baby is still crying, screaming, and the sound of my heels are splitting the marble beneath the weight of every step I take, and every step I take is louder than ever. Arthur tells me he hopes I start bleeding soon. I make a fist around the cash and follow Arthur in step out of the bank and into the blinding sun. In Latin, Maris, Mass or male, is the male form of Marcia. In Roman mythology, Mars is the god of war and linked to the Greek god Ares. Ares had an affair with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. You know, the one who had all of the affairs with gods and mortals. Thank you.